In the quiet California suburbs of the 1970s, a family was awake, safely behind locked doors, or so they thought, but in the shadows, a hunter was already watching. He studied their routines, slipped silently through windows, and turned ordinary homes into scenes of terror. By day, he wore a badge, sworn to protect and serve. By night, he became the very monster he was supposed to stop. This man, a police officer trained in law and order, used that same knowledge to outsmart investigators and terrorize his own communities. For over a decade, he was a ghost with many names: the Visalia ransacker, the East Area rapist, the original Night Stalker, later united under one chilling identity: the Golden State Killer. This is the story of Joseph James DeAngelo Jr., the trusted officer who became California's most sadistic predator, and how his crimes, his double life, and the science of DNA finally brought his darkness into the light. Joseph James DeAngelo Jr. was born on November 8, 1945, in Bath, New York. He is the son of a U.S. Army sergeant. His childhood was far from stable. Reports suggest a home filled with strict discipline and, at times, abuse. The turbulence of those early years planted seeds of anger and control that would later define his crimes. As a teenager, DeAngelo moved across states with his family, eventually settling in California. After high school, he served in the U.S. Navy at Vietnam during the Vietnam War, where he saw the world, but also, according to later accounts, began showing troubling behavior, including theft and manipulation. When he returned, he studied criminal justice, eventually entering law enforcement, a career that would provide both cover and opportunity for his secret life. In 1973, DeAngelo joined the Exeter, California Police Force. He appeared outwardly stable, married in 1973 to Sharon Marie Huddle, father of children, living in quiet neighborhoods. Before the known rapes and murders, DeAngelo's criminal identity began as a burglar and prowler. From 1974 into 1975, a mysterious prowler slipped into homes in the Visalia area, taking underwear, personal items, sometimes going through women's clothing drawers. He came to be known as the Visalia ransacker. Then, in 1975, while still employed as a police officer, DeAngelo committed a violent act. He shot and killed Professor Claude Snelling at his Visalia home in front of Snelling's daughter. Prosecutors say DeAngelo also assaulted Snelling's daughter and fled the scene. This act foreshadowed the brutality that would later define his crimes. In a modest home, a young woman wakes to find a masked man standing by her bed, flashlight in hand, knife glinting. He binds her, whispers threats, and vanishes before dawn. It is the first of what would become more than 50 rapes, each more brazen, more cruel, more confident. Over the next 3 years, neighborhoods from Carmichael to Citrus Heights live in fear. Couples sleep with guns under pillows. Parents teach children how to dive through windows if the glass shatters. He studies their routines, stalks their homes, and breaks in while they sleep. On February 2nd, 1978, a young couple, Brian and Katie Maggiore, are walking their dog when they spot a suspicious figure. Moments later, both are shot dead. The predator now grows bolder and migrates south, and in the late 1979, Goleta, near Santa Barbara, a new name takes shape: the original Night Stalker. Homes that once felt safe become slaughterhouses of silence. Couples are attacked in their beds, bludgeoned or strangled, sometimes both. The killer leaves behind ropes, bindings, and evidence of a ritualistic need for dominance. In 1980, Ventura County, Lyman and Charlene Smith are murdered in their home, a crime scene so brutal it shocks even hardened detectives. The killings continue: Manuela Withoon in Irvine, Keith and Patrice Harrington in Dana Point, Gregory Sanchez, and Sherry Domingo in Goleta. Each attack eerily similar, each one the work of a ghost the police cannot catch. May 1986, Irvine, California, the final known murder. 18-year-old Janelle Cruz is found beaten to death in her family home. The violence mirrors the earlier crimes, but then, suddenly, the trail goes cold. For decades, nothing. The names Visalia Ransacker, East Area Rapist, and Original Night Stalker drift into police folklore. Terrifying legends with no face, no arrest, no end. Investigators retire. Files gather dust. Victims age. The monster vanishes, leaving only questions. Who is the man responsible for more than 13 murders, 51 rapes, and 121 housebreaking? This is our first video on this channel. Please support us by liking this video and subscribing to our channel. It will really serve as a source of encouragement as we keep making more videos like this. Thank you. Throughout the 1970s and 1980s, detectives from Sacramento to Orange County hunted him. They built profiles, released sketches, and interviewed hundreds of suspects. Yet every lead dissolved into nothing. He was too careful, wearing gloves, using masks, and slipping through the cracks between police jurisdictions. By the early 2000s, science offered new hope. DNA technology had advanced enough to prove that the East Area Rapist and the Southern California murders were the work of the same man. But even with a full genetic profile, there was no match in any law enforcement database. The killer's DNA sat in evidence lockers, silent, waiting. Then, in 2018, came the breakthrough that would change criminal investigation forever. Detectives working with forensic genealogists uploaded the Golden State Killer's DNA into GED Match, a public genealogy website where ordinary people upload DNA to explore family ancestry. It wasn't the killer who appeared, but a distant cousin. From that tiny genetic connection, investigators began to build a family tree, tracing back through generations of marriages, births, and descendants. The process was slow and meticulous. Every new branch narrowed the search until the tree pointed to one man who fit the timeline, the age, and the geography: Joseph James DeAngelo Jr. A 72-year-old former police officer living quietly in Citrus Heights, California. Undercover teams began surveillance. They watched his house, tracked his movements, and waited for a chance to collect DNA without his knowledge. One afternoon, DeAngelo tossed a tissue into a trash can outside a store. Investigators retrieved it, rushed it to the lab, and when the results came back, it was a perfect match to the Golden State Killer's DNA. After 4 decades, the Phantom had a face. On April 24th, 2018, police moved in. DeAngelo was arrested outside his home, a quiet, retired grandfather who had once worn a badge, now exposed as one of America's most ruthless serial predators. In 2020, more than 40 years after his crimes began, Joseph James DeAngelo Jr. finally faced justice. Age had withered the once powerful predator, the former police officer who'd stalked California's suburbs, now sat frail and silent in a courtroom, wearing an orange jumpsuit and a face mask. Before him were dozens of survivors and families of the murdered, people who had lived with fear, loss, and unanswered questions for decades. DeAngelo offered no defense. Instead, he pleaded guilty to 13 murders and admitted to dozens of rapes and burglaries too old to prosecute. The plea spared victims the pain of a lengthy trial, but forced him to publicly confront every life he destroyed. For 2 days, survivors stood and told their stories, voices shaking, tears falling, reclaiming power he once stole. In August 2020, the judge sentenced DeAngelo to life in prison, without parole. No appeals, no release. The man who hid in shadows would die behind bars, and the echoes of his victim's strength would finally outlive his silence. The story of Joseph James, D'Angelo Jr., is more than a record of violence. It's a warning and a testament. It shows how evil can hide in plain sight, even behind a badge meant to protect. But it also proves that truth has patience. For decades, science advanced, detectives persisted, and survivors refused to be forgotten. In the end, a strand of DNA, smaller than a grain of dust, shattered decades of silence. Justice came late, but it came certain. And in that, every victim's voice was finally heard.